Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Elisa Voschel. I'm Executive Director here at Minnesota Center for Book Arts. It's so nice to be with you all on this gorgeous spring morning. Thank you for venturing inside to be here with us today. For our 2022, it is 2023, but these are our 2022 McKnight Fellows for Book Arts. We're here today with C.B. Sherlock, who will be in conversation with Ruth Rogers, Curator of Special Collections and visiting lecturer at Wellesley College. Unfortunately, due to a family emergency, our other 2022 McKnight Fellow for Book Arts, Corinne Teed, is not able to be here today. For those of you who've been involved with MCBA for some time, welcome back. And if any of you are new, Minnesota Center for Book Arts is a community-based organization dedicated to igniting community and creativity through the book arts. Through our studios, our artist development programs, workshops, and educational opportunities for people of all ages, we preserve the tools and traditions of book arts and connect contemporary audiences to the arts of the book. We believe in the limitless creative possibilities of this dynamic and evolving art form, and envision a world in which creative expression through the book arts is accessible to all. From workshops and artist talks to exhibitions, to memberships and supporting artists in our consignment program through our shop, there are many ways for you to get involved with MCBA, and I hope that you will. I'd like to acknowledge that today's program and this transformational fellowship is made possible through the generous support of the McKnight Foundation. We are so grateful to be part of this cohort and to be able to provide this deep and impactful fellowship for mid-career book artists. Founded on the belief that Minnesota thrives when its artists thrive, the McKnight Foundation's Arts and Culture program has been a cornerstone of the Foundation's work since it began in 1982. The McKnight Artist Fellowships program provides annual unrestricted cash awards to outstanding mid-career Minnesota artists in 15 different creative disciplines. Program partner organizations administer the fellowships and structure them to respond to the unique challenges of different creative disciplines. Currently, the foundation contributes about $2.8 million per year to its statewide fellowships. Like the McKnight Foundation, we believe that working artists activate our communities and deepen the dimension and quality of our work, or of our lives rather, and our communities. We're honored to be a partner in this work. Support for MCBA's programs is also provided by the voters of Minnesota through a Minnesota State Arts Board operating grant, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, as well as individual supporters and members of MCBA. If you enjoy today's program, please consider becoming a member or making a donation to support our work so that we can continue to provide enriching arts program for artists and enthusiasts of all ages and backgrounds. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Annika Schneider, our Director of Exhibitions and Artist Programs, who oversees our McKnight Fellowships, and will introduce our speakers. Thank you, and join me in welcoming Annika.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming out today to support MCBA and especially CB. And welcome to the McKnight Fellowship for Book Artists conversation for our 2022 fellow, CB Sherlock. And again, my name is Annika Schneider, and I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Director of Exhibitions and Artist Programs at Minnesota Center for Book Arts. For today's programming, we are so fortunate to learn more about CB's work. It has been a special privilege and joy to work with both CB over this fellowship year and to get to know Ruth Rogers. It was really a pleasure to really get some inside views into CB's practice, her thinking, her work. And then also, I really learned a lot from you, Ruth, on the institutional collector's perspective on book arts, which I am fortunate to have that insight from you as well. I have the wrong paper up here. I just realized. But I'm really happy to introduce CB, who is a book artist, especially interested in letterpress, who has made some amazing work over her fellowship year. And then also Ruth, who joins us from Wellesley College and is their curator of rare books, which includes artist books. So for today's programming, we will first hear a brief artist talk from CB, giving context into her work over both the fellowship year and greater context to her practice. And then we will enter into conversation between CB and Ruth, followed by moderated questions from the audience, which I will moderate. And then please join us for the reception in the Literary Commons outside with food and drink. Okay, without further ado, CB Sherlock.
I'm going to try this up here. Well, maybe not. Welcome. I'm glad to see all of you here. It's such an honor. Thank you for coming. I am so thankful to the Center for Book Arts, thankful to the McKnight for providing this year. MCBA has been there teaching me, helping me grow as an artist, as inspiration to do more. And with the McKnight, it has pushed me forward to think bigger, do more, and the affirmation that I am in the right place. I discovered book arts when I happened upon the Minnesota Center for Book Arts in 1997. The place had everything I loved. It had books, it had printing, it had paper, and it had an intriguing exhibition of art on the book. And I felt like I had come home. I took 5 years of classes, from box making to letterpress to paper making. With fabulous people, I was able to collaborate and teach, from Regula Russell, Chip Schilling, Paulette Myers-Rich. Erica was one of my first teachers, Jana Pullman, and I get to continue to work with these people, from Bruce Johnson, Sally Power, and so many more. Because of all these classes, I know the difference between Tibetan paper and Japanese paper. It helps me to choose which papers I'm going to use on the next project. I know and love letterpress. I realize that I can get this registration that's beyond just moving things around. And it fits with the beat of my heart. It's the right pace. I am a printmaker, but doing lithography in Talio, so slow. It's almost like standing still compared to using the letterpress. I know how to bind books. I know how to be quick with the sewing. It's something I grew up with and did well early on. And so I love making the books. When I create, I combine my love of nature, wordplay, and unique book structures. My art reflects the world around me, capturing the brilliant and harsh moments of nature, visually layering my art with text and image. I intuitively add color, shape, and words, usually working on the press. It is a recipe: add language, nature imagery, and expressive book structure. Each time bringing the component, and I'm forgetting the slides. So you can keep going. So I've got images of MCBA in the basement. We can go through to here. So these were different things for measuring and getting just to the right place. And we'll go again, and all the letterpress. So it is a recipe: add language, nature imagery, the expressive book structure, each time bringing the components together in a new arrangement. Okay. This is kind of like a dance. Okay, these are some of the early books that I did with collaborating with Regula. And it's interesting, each time you start a new book, you can start with an idea, you can start with the text, you can start with the shape, or you can start with the material. I've used all of them. So the most common is starting with the text. And in these books, I choose something that I love from the public domain, sometimes writing a piece for myself, or from a poet that I love. No matter what it is, something that I love, that I like. For producing a book, you deal with it for months at a time. You live with it. It has to be something that you do not get bored with as you read it over and over again on the press. I've used published authors like Shakespeare. Go back a moment. Like Shakespeare. I've used Bill Holmes in Horizontal Grandeur. I've used Friends in the Sand. Usually when I use other people's text, it's because they've said it better than I could. When I was looking for text on belonging to place, I came across Bill Holmes' Horizontal Grandeur, and he talked about loving the prairie and saying it much better than I could, and it just pulled to my heart. Okay. We're a little bit forward. So in this shows that I have a tendency to use expansive imagery, that when I'm doing the prairie, it gets wide. When I'm doing the water, it gets wide. And we can go to the next. So in 2020, I decided to use my connection to the Yellowstone River as my next project. I was born in Montana, miles from the Yellowstone River, just a couple miles from the Yellowstone. And after we moved to Minnesota, my family and I would return every summer. We took more time seriously exploring the river and the confluence to the Missouri and the Yellowstone west of Livingston. From 2020, during COVID, we would take time camping along the side of the river, exploring. At each stop we explored, I sketched, took photos, and painted color swatches to bring home. In the studio, I mapped out the places that we explored. I used my GPS on my cell phone to find these places of access along the river. And sometimes it would be Seven Sisters, Intake Dam, but always an interesting place. And luckily Jim was there to drive me closer to it. I had planned to work with several pieces of text intertwining. I thought the use of the Lewis and Clark journals would really work, specifically the writing from Clark's month on the Yellowstone. I'd layer Clark's historic text with the imagery of the river, weaving in a modern context to keep the place grounded in the present day. This stems from so many years of experience with the terrain. My childhood was filled with travel from Minnesota to Montana to visit Papa's farm, and later I would take the same journey with my family to parallel the Yellowstone River for family reunions. I've always been drawn and inspired by the landscapes of Montana and Minnesota. Now it sounds lovely to intertwine the text of Clark with my own narrative, the layering of the imagery with the river. I read the journals online, plus the published accounts of several of the travelers meshed together. And I had started connecting stories in my head to these places, these spots on the river. So you've been seeing through 2022, I worked on both drawings and writings about the river. I have explored the river, explored the drawings of the landscapes of the river. I practiced drawing the river with pen drawings, watercolor, sumi paintings. I did Pompey's Pillar and the Confluence like 5 times each, and settled on using Gasenshi paper, which was 56 inches wide by 15 inches tall, and the sumi ink, which gave me these lovely wash colors that went over them. But at this point, I took the leap, starting for writing my own work. I started with words like abundance, essential, always. These were grounding words for my writing. With extras from the McKnight grant, I worked with Georgia Greeley to hone my words, increasing their strength, texture, and heart. I went back and forth between the images, writing with work, and the images and the writings I was working on. The writing was not linear. My experience with the river was not linear in time, space, and experience. One of the first pieces I brought the first piece I wrote, which had to do with my friend Rose. Kinship, Sheep Mountain. Rose told me about this place. This was her place when she was, and we're going to go back a couple. This one. This was her place when she was 20-something. She built a cabin in the hills above this location. She filled it with all her adventurous and creative energy. It made her smile to talk of it, always. This location came up in conversation. Where is your spiritual place? This was hers. Mine was 20 miles away. Our spiritual places were close, so close. There is this thin place, a narrow spot between material and spirit. The divine is here. We both felt it in our essential selves. Well, along the way, Clark's journals disappeared from this project. I completed 10 large pieces, each drawing with a vignette of its own. The text written in the water. Together they express my love for this river. Now, I did this up through the beginning of this year. And at this point was, how do I put these into a book form? They're long, they're big, they're expansive. They capture how big the river is. How would I put it into a book? A book is intimate, held. I've had several conversations with Ruth Rogers this year about making my book, and I realized with the conversations that the book had to be about the exploration of the river, and so that became the key component of how I would express my connection, use these images. But it's still, like I think I have an idea of where I will go with it. Drawings plus exploration plus vignettes, setting up each page. The viewer would lift, turn, and peel the papers. We'll stop here for a moment. So we have the expansive river. We have the text that I've written. We have the river map to find out the place. I could bring in the expansiveness that I've done before, like in the sand that I showed you, the blue book. So I was thinking that the book would open up and open up. It might open up and open up. I'm thinking I'm going to start printing this week, and I'm not certain how these are going to fit into the page. I know that it will be 22 inches wide. So the size of the river will be decreased. I'll use papers that I've used before. I used kokoshi on Midsummer. I could do layer upon layer of colors on there. It worked well. Okawara was used by other people that I've known, Sarah Langworthy, Veronica Shaper, and Gaylord Chalmette. I thought, okay, this should work. And Regula and I used Kaji for the thinness to transparency. So those were the 3 papers I chose. Those are the 3 papers I've ordered and have been cutting down to size for the last month so that I could start printing. I now am getting into, so you can see the papers. This is the kokoshi. I started looking at bindings. So I fell in love with this binding by Stuart Brockman. It has the tooling that's reminiscent of the American West. And it has the book boards that I have a friend that's very willing to make for me so that these will turn out beautifully. I've been thinking about boxes and whatnot. It's been a busy year. I've been exploring. This was my explore. This will stay. Let's go back one. Back one. This was, I went to DC in December and was at the Library of Congress. And so I started looking at books that were opened up and more expansive. And I'm trying to think. We have Carol Lee Campbell's book up there. And that's the one name I can remember at the moment. So, but it's been a busy year. I also went to the Watson Library at the Metropolitan last week to look at some of their books to see. And we have this book that was on quarter-inch boards. Clemens to buy.
Clemens to be Islama. It's the one that you wrote about.
Okay. I've been searching for his books. I couldn't find them at the Library of Congress. But I've been going to book fairs. This one is an early Codex one. I went to Miami had a parallel book fair in February, like Codex. So we went there. This is Manhattan that I was at last weekend. So, and in between the two, I had a solo show with all those big expansive drawings where I did 2 talks and several private showings for people, since with COVID, people were wanting to come in smaller groups. So at this point, and then last night I had an open studio event where we had to clean the studio and invite people in. It was quite a celebration. I'm ready to spend my days printing now. I'm so excited. I don't have any deadlines until November, so I think I can get this done. I do have a trip planned to Montana, and I thank you all for coming and thank MCBA and McKnight for this wonderful opportunity. The wonderful affirmation of this grant is fabulous. I've grown so much during this time in my skills as a writer, as my confidence, and in being able to think bigger and hopefully accomplish more. Thank you very much. I think it's the moment when Ruth joins me for a conversation over here. And I don't know if you want one of these. Do we need these?
Hello.
Yeah. Sure, check that. It's this can press up.
Ellsworth. Yes. Okay, so I really enjoyed your talk, and in many ways you have covered some of the topics that we were planning to discuss, but now we'll have a chance to go into a little more detail. And I'll try to give you, I'll try to vary the questions a bit. I made notes during your talk, and one of the things that you said that I want to probe a little bit deeper on is you started with, well, first you said using other people's words because they say it better than I could. And you were talking about Scott Holm.
Bill Holm.
Bill Holm, and you used his words. But then this book is a departure for you because you're using your own words.
Yes.
Correct? Okay. And you said along the way, well, you started with Lewis and Clark's journals, and that makes sense for the topic. And then you said along the way, Clark's journals disappeared in the book.
Yeah.
So what was that moment, and what caused you to give up on those? Did it not feel authentic?
What happened was that I was reading his journals and then going back to his journals, trying to figure out what I would take out of them. And I was having a hard time getting myself to go back and read them again. They were boring. He went on and on. Clark's journals are left out of the stories that are published because he's wordy but not interesting. So I decided it wouldn't get me anywhere to use his words. And it was hard, it was difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The book is very personal. I mean, you talked about the reason you made it, and you talked about your inspiration and how much history you have with the place. It's hard to find another writer. In my experience as a collector, I would say the books that are the most successful and feel the most authentic are those that have a voice that comes from somewhere personal, and yet, you might disagree with me here, but it seems to me the balance, finding the right balance between the personal and the universal in a book is difficult.
Okay.
As a collector, I have been approached by artists who want me to buy their book, and there's something about it that's just too personal, that it may feel authentic. It is authentic to the person who wrote it, but it's not enough to grab a lot of people and to feel like it will continue to resonate with other people, not just with the person who made it. So did you struggle with that feeling as well, that you need to make this somehow accessible to a wide audience, not just about yourself and your own experience?
I do struggle with that. It's like, is there something I can add to the book that will make it more accessible? I think the vignettes that I write about are fairly universal. That I write about my perfect day. I think it adds a question for others to think, well, what is my perfect day? I've asked my kids that question. It informs me. I've written about abundance, which I realized that the Native Americans have a similar philosophy as myself in hearing Robin Wall Kimmerer read her book, Sweetgrass. So I went back and read her work and thought, can I add her stories in here? So I don't, at this point, I can't see how I would layer that work in. But I also know that many times I am inspired when I hear Wendell Berry or Jane Goodall talk about, that every individual matters. And those universal things that pull people in, that I feel, needs to be said, so that, I kind of go with, what is it, Jean Cousteau's, who said, people will take care of that which they love. People love, but they need to learn. So part of what I feel like I'm doing is teaching people, showing people what I love, so that they understand it better, so that they then can learn to love it and take care of it.
And that's what makes it universal. I mean, that is exactly the recipe. As hard as it is to come up with, I think that's what makes artist books in particular personal, and yet have a far effect, have a long reach on other people. Because we're all human. But I want to touch on another choice that you made about the format and the paper. Again, it seems to me, and I'm not the maker, so this is for you to respond to, but I am a critic, and I definitely do see a lot of books. And those that have the most impact are usually the ones where there's enough mystery, enough unfolding of a story slowly, so that you have to become part of it. You have to read it slowly. You have to uncover it slowly. It can't be a quick read, and it has to draw you in. So the difficult thing for you, I imagine, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, I want you to respond to this, is how do you find the right format and the right materials to create that sense of pacing and mystery and unfolding without losing someone, because it might get difficult, or it might get boring, or it might be you have to sort of have this thread that you're drawing throughout to keep the reader involved.
Right.
Do you consider all of this when you're figuring out what
I
materials?
am now. I have.
No, that's not true. You have.
I have been considering. I've been thinking that the page layout is too similar per page. How do I start moving slower through it and have you move across the landscape of the river or down the river, so that you are still moving along this journey. But moving through the book and still interacting, still wanting to open up and seeing where you are on that map. That it's not just the reading, the shorelines. It's not just the map. It's not just the vignettes, but something else that makes an aha when they're all put together.
That's right. And that's what I'm talking about. So for instance, one of our talks early on, when you showed me, I think you were planning an accordion or something very long, and I had a frank discussion with you, and I said, don't do an accordion.
Yeah.
Well, I encourage you to look at other people's work who are following a similar theme, needing for it to be a landscape that unfolds slowly. And I remember mentioning Carol Campbell's book. It's called Travels. Manuel Cordova. It's called Travels, the Journey of Manuel Cordova, something like that. Because she's following a river too, but it's very different. It's a different story. It's about an explorer, and it's not her own words. So I was really happy to see that you were starting to use overlays, translucencies, the other way of showing the river without the text, and then showing the river with the text as you turn the page. And that brings me to a question about handwriting. The handwriting, for some people, is very intimate and personal. And for you, obviously, your handwriting makes it very authentic about your experience. Do you have any concern about people being able to read handwriting or stick with it, especially when the handwriting is so beautifully evocative of the shore?
Well, the handwriting, for me, I love text as imagery, whether it's my handwriting or it's I'm thinking metal type. How do you say that? The
Typographic.
Yeah. And whether it makes you look like things are moving back, moving across, being thick. To me, there are certain people that I love seeing the text in the imagery. Mae Stevens with her water text that was not meant to be read. And Adam Pendleton, which does these big capitals that just shout at you because his work is just all black and white and shouting. Even Chip Schilling had one where it was just simple letters that were the background, the imagery that just kind of tickled me. I just was enjoying it. So in doing the river, I thought I can make the river more interesting. I can add this movement through the water.
And I think you've done it really successfully, and it's not always easy for people to use their own handwriting. And on one hand it's legible, but you have to work at it. But that is almost the metaphor about being meditative at the river. The handwriting itself is pulling you in. I mean, that's my observation.
But I also know that I don't want people to work too hard to do that. And so I group the text beside it or on top of it, somewhere to add, so that they can get the little story, the vignette with it, instead of struggling to read, because especially with my having to reduce the imagery, I don't think anybody is going to really get more than a couple words at a time. And so, and this way also allows me to make sure that the text that I use is edited
Yes.
and can grab you quickly instead of wander, which sometimes I've got more extra space in the river so I can wander at times and repeat and say things over and over again if I've got too much space. But it still all flows.
Yeah. So, how much more time do we have for questions before we go to the audience?
We're about at time. You want
Oh, well, I have one more question then that I think may intrigue the audience as well, I hope. So as a curator of an academic collection, I'm always showing artists books along with rare books to classes, and students often have to write written responses or essays. Sometimes they do entire projects on them. So I'm always curious when I ask this question to artists, do you think about the afterlife of your books? Do you have a particular hope, desire that your work will be used in a certain way by a certain audience? What do you hope for the afterlife of your books?
I hope that they don't sit on my shelves. I have been thinking that there are like two directions that I tend to go. One is more very non-traditional. I have a tendency to do books with cubes and know that it challenges people to think, is this a book? And then I go in the direction of like Midsummer, where it's very fine press with a non-traditional binding. I hope that whoever ends up with my books love them and enjoy them over and over again. I have sons that make me go to theater again and again, so when when working with a piece, they start saying, with Midsummer, oh, this would be perfect for Puck to hold on the stage. And just kind of my head goes, well, that's more than I expected. But I don't, I choose themes that are close to home, that move my heart, and hope that other people can connect with that, find their own experience that they then bring to the piece and have their own new experience by combining them.
Yes, well said. Great, well, thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're done.
Thank you both. We have time for questions from the audience. If you raise your hand, I'll come over and bring the mic to you.
Hi there, thank you both. Just to hop on that afterlife question, which I think was really good. Would somebody potentially be inspired to go to these same places along the Yellowstone based on the book? Would they be able to?
They would be able to, because they are labeled with the access. It's the DNR fishing access locations, and so you could go there. Some of them, you drive right by them when you're driving across the country, like Colson Park, which is this big giant bluff. Can't miss it. So I have one of those pieces going to Montana for a show next month, so we'll see what the locals respond to it. So we'll see.
Well, I think it'd be really fun. I was on the river, inspired by Lewis and Clark, and I think it'd be fun to be like, do the CB.
I got a couple extra spots for you.
Okay.
Lewis and Clark, the sequel.
Any other questions?
Hi, CB. In your work, I see a lot of nature, not only like with the binding of A Midsummer's Night, some of the work you've showed me in your studio, more of your very long, expansive work. And there's all these elements of nature, whether it's like prairie grass or the water, and then with the latest with the river. Because books take so long to fully develop, can you give us a little peek at where you're going next, or what's next?
I know that I have a one-of-a-kind book coming up. I've been invited to alter a book for a banned book exhibition that Harriet Bart and John Noisy are curating. And I've chosen to do Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. It's going to be a month of reading and...
You're not using the first edition, I hope.
No. So all the editions I can find look like paperback books where there's only text. So I'm reading and drawing my own conclusions. And it will be, and then those will go on cubes. So you will have building blocks of the origins. So, thank you.
Great.
I love the way you use cursive in your river. I like the way it flows. It makes me think of water. I use cursive a lot in my work. I have a question, I think maybe just for the audience. I'm aware of the fact that cursive is not taught anymore, and some of my grandchildren, and I'm talking college-age grandchildren, cannot read some of my books. So it's becoming an arcane form of communication. I suppose it's like I can't read Old English. But what does that mean for you? What does it mean for me? What does it mean for the culture when students are no longer taught cursive in school? I don't have an answer.
On short term, my grandmother's handwriting was not incredibly readable. Like my husband could read 1 out of 7 words. And it just, I believe that in short term, the people that have a certain amount of ability to actually take on the challenge of reading it will be able to do that. But it takes a certain willingness to get past that. Long term, I don't know if it will be just become a visual.
It could be, but I have some experience with teaching students calligraphy. I mean, I don't teach calligraphy, but in the history of the book course that I teach, students have to learn to read, Renaissance handwriting. They have to read Gothic handwriting. They don't do it well, but it doesn't take very long to be able to do it. You just have to practice. And I don't think that our Roman cursive is that different from Roman capitals. The leap is not nearly as far as it is, for instance, from Gothic to Roman. So, speaking like an academic here, I would say that you have to be true to whatever feels normal, and students, whoever it is who's reading it, is going to have to decipher. And isn't there a parallel in any other art field? Aren't there ways that we have to learn to decipher earlier forms of handwriting or symbols? I'm asking that rhetorically because I think that it's part of our brain's makeup that we do have to learn these things. Ben?
CB, this is more technical, and you normally do limited press runs. And if people want to take this book out with them to the Yellowstone, they're probably not going to take your limited edition. Are you going to, what is the original press run, and are you going to do kind of a trade edition so people can take it?
I have not thought about doing a trade edition. It would be an interesting thing to add on. I had been planning on doing a deluxe and a standard, but there have been parts of our conversation which has made me think that I need to do something else with this project that's more about actually following the river. And so we'll see where that goes. It's like anything's possible. I only know one other letterpress printer that does small edition work that's done a trade book. So I'm
Oh, I know others, I bet Betty knows others.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, then I will need to get a
Yeah.
list so I can.
Yeah.
That they do
Sam Winston did a dictionary book. It's a beautiful dictionary book, and then he did a trade edition.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, no, I have that. I have the dictionary store.
Well, I was just going to add a comment back to the cursive thing, and one of the pieces that I love so much about experiencing an artist book is the complexity and the layering and the surprises, and the work of it is the stimulation of it, the gratification when I work through it. So, but that's me, you know, and that might be something that many of us say, oh yes, that's me too. And that's part of the challenge, the good work that a place like this does is to continue that firing on those synapses and keeping our brains engaged in, you know, the psychic and physical and emotional. So personally, and having studied calligraphy in my former life, yay, I think it's
Anyone else? I guess I have a question if no one else does. I know Ruth can be very clear about her opinions, you know, in a great way. And CB, in your conversations through Ruth, I know it's your job as the artist to, you know, take in all that information from Ruth, from the research you're doing at the Library of Congress. How has your relationship with Ruth and those conversations and research impact the development of this book?
Well, initially, the biggest one was helping me to clarify what, I want to say this word, the mission of the book would be, which was to inspire others to explore their connection to place and to expand that definition of place from a single location to a larger location. I mean, this is 400 miles. It's bigger, yeah. So that was the first thing, and it was such an aha that I didn't know if I wanted to say it out loud to you and see, you know, where would she take it? And then I really took your opinions about the accordion seriously, but the accordion I couldn't figure out how the layering would work. And so when I decided that the layering had to be part of it, then it made more sense that it would not be an accordion. So.
Anything else? Any last questions?
CB, could you give a little bit about how the grant affected your work and what the requirements were with the grant and what you've had to do, all the various steps and the things to complete the grant?
So the grant is wonderful. There are no strings attached. So one of the big things I did was pay off all my COVID debts and could start thinking that I was not in debt, would not get more in debt as I started to pay for this next project. Another part was that education, there was a piece for education that I could spend specifically, and that focused me. So I took a class here on writing, and it didn't fit, and so I asked another friend who writes, who has helped me edit other work, to work with me on a weekly basis. And so I feel in working with Georgia Greeley, I've grown so much as a writer, enough that I am willing to share my work with others and be proud of it and read it to people. So So I don't have to do anything this year if I didn't want to. That was one thing that was lovely. But I also had this book in me that wanted to come out. And so going and visiting, finishing up the drawings, going where I need to go with that project was open. I had money for travel, so I could do the extra book fair this year. And that was lovely. It was different than just doing one a year. And there are more things to come. I have another year having access here at the Center for Book Arts. I have another artist residency with this program, and I have a third thing. What is it?
An exhibition.
And an exhibition next year. Don't forget. Where the book will be done by that time.
Our 2022 and 2023 fellows will have an exhibition in the main gallery in 2025, which seems a while off, but it'll be here before we know it.
Did that answer the question?
Any other questions? Okay, if not, thank you all for joining us so much, and please have a bite to eat and a drink and enjoy some conversation.